This lab asks you to do some subnetting math and then configure some IP addresses on routers. In this video, I'll clarify the instructions and then I'll get into some details about CML-Free if that's the path you choose to use. Let's get into it. Let me set some context as usual with the official cert guides in Volume 1. Part 5, Chapter 17 is where you'll find some of the background for this lab, particularly the how to configure the routers part. Here's the direct link to the lab. It ends in CLab 117, and the name is IPv4 Addresses 2. There's a series of 5 similar labs, 1 through 5, at the blog. Each of the blog posts begins with scenarios and tasks at the top of the page, an answer and explanation at the bottom, and then an admonition to go do the lab, either in Packet Tracer or CML, right there in the middle. So hopefully you've looked at the page, or you can go do that now. Now, to help you along the way and dig just a little deeper, I've got a video that's a lab intro and a video that's a lab review. This is the lab intro video. Let's take a look at how the lab begins. We've got 4 routers connected to a switch. The switch has all default config, so all the routers are connected to the same VLAN. They're connected to the same subnet. We see the subnet ID out here to the left with the subnet mask. So you'll need to come up with the IP addresses to configure on those router interfaces. And then each router has an outer interface, if you will, that's connected to a solo subnet, if you will, with only one router connected to it, with 4 different subnet IDs and masks listed, and you'll do some math on those as well to come up with a configuration. Now, the standard config is the same pretty much on all 4 routers. There's a host name configured, R1, R2, R3, and R4 respectively, and then the rest of the config is the same on all 4. So I'm just showing R1 here. What is that config? Hey, we've confirmed we've administratively enabled the interface and that there's no prior configuration of an IP address. The IP addresses are up to you. Let's take a look at the lab instructions. Focusing on that central subnet, here's the subnet ID and mask. Your job is to figure out the IP address to use in the configuration on all 4 routers, and it's pretty simple in this case. You want to make the 4th octet match the router number. So R1 uses .1, R2 .2, and so on as the 4th octet. The hard bit of math comes in the other 4 subnets, so let me click and get those up here. And what you need to do is look at the subnet IDs and masks and calculate the range of addresses per subnet. And then the instructions say that the router should use the numerically highest address in each subnet. So whatever that is, use that along with the mask you see here. And by the way, you can assume that in the supplied packet tracer and CML files that the hosts are pre-configured to use the lowest addresses in those subnets. All right, those are your marching orders. If you're using Cisco Packet Tracer, you can go ahead and do the lab. There's a link to the lab blog page that you can reference. If you're using CML-Free, keep watching for a few extra hints. So if you're using CML-Free, you probably know this already. You can't use the same interface IDs in CML-Free as you would use in Packet Tracer. So on the left, you see the diagram that the lab supplies that uses the interface IDs used in the Packet Tracer file. Over on the right, you see a table that shows you the interface IDs that you'll see in CML-Free. It's an easy correlation. Gig01 becomes E01, Gig02 becomes E02, and just to show you visually, I'll cross out the G's and put in an E. So it's a very simple correlation in this case. Also, sometimes we need additional config in the CML file. There's no additional config versus the lab, so it's a nice clean lab and easy to correlate. The other thing with CML-Free is we're going to do this trick called router as many hosts for testing if you choose to go there. Now, when you hear about this, if you think, hey, this is a bad idea for me, router as many hosts is just too confusing, you don't have to bother to test from hosts. But you can say, hey, I'll try it a little. It's not too confusing. Or yes, I want to embrace this and try it. Jump in with both the try pings and trace routes to test out your lab and see if you got it working. All right. So what am I talking about here? Well, this is a copy of what you'll see in CML-Free when you import the file. And here in the center are the devices that you would see in the lab diagram on the lab, right? 4 routers, a central switch, and these outer switches, switch 1, 2, 3, and 4 as they're numbered. But down here at the bottom, we have this one router labeled as router as many hosts. That's there instead of the 4 PCs that you can test from. And it's a way that if you configure the router in the way I've pre-configured it, it will act as 4 separate hosts. Now, that may be surprising, but if you go watch 2 background videos, you'll get a little bit better handle on that. But for you, you don't really have to understand how it does it, but you can understand this. If you log into the console of that router as many host device and do commands like these, ping, and you give it a VRF name as you see here, then you can ping as if you're host 1 or traceroute as if you're host 2 and so on, and test as if you're each of these hosts, and it generates packets and sends them into your network and it mimics those hosts. Why do we bother doing that? Well, it turns out there is a 5-node limit in CML-Free. You can't have more than 5 active nodes, and in this lab we go past the 5 active node limit if we used individual hosts. This router as many host trick keeps us from going past that limit, so you can do the lab. All right, so look at that video that should appear above my head now. In the video, they'll be in the description for 2 videos that give you more detail on this feature if you want to test from hosts when you're doing this lab in CML-Free, or you could decide not bother. Your choice, just want you to make you aware of it. You should see a few suggestions of additional videos you might care to watch now, but of course, I just intro to lab, so probably a good time to go off and do lab as well. If you're new to the channel, of course, subscribe and click the bell to get notified of new ones, and likes, comments, and shares are always appreciated. Hey, thanks for hanging out. Talk to you later.